We're back with the 39 Gen podcast from USA University, and I have Zev Rosenberg with me, who's an awesome person and
Nice to be
an
back.
absolute, you're one of the foundational people of the field here in the States, I would say, Zev. And but today go ahead. What would you say about that?
No, I was joking. I would say people like Dan Bensky, John McDonald, and Van Buren, Worsley. They're like version 1.0. Ted Kapchuk. I'm kind of like version 1.2. So I'm just a little bit after those guys. So a couple of years behind the curve there. So, but definitely
That's awesome.
Foundational as a profession, because there isn't really a profession when I started. So
Yeah. You last time talked about something that's a passion of yours and something that you like to talk about. And I'd love to talk to you a little bit more about that.
please.
You had mentioned in passing that you were very interested in, and you'd written some books about the Ming Men Fire. And it's a concept that we hear in acupuncture school, but don't always fully understand. Talk to me. What is the Ming Men Fire?
One of the things about Chinese medicine, because it's a medicine of change and transformation, as soon as you lock onto something, it starts moving again. So
Right.
my understanding of it changes as well, because it's not like a fixed thing like a tendon or a
Yeah.
bone that you find, or a toe. It's a dynamic. It's the best way I could describe it. So this is the book. Some self-advertising here. Afterglow. Have you seen it, by the way, Sean?
I haven't seen the copy of the book. I haven't seen a copy of your book. You talked about it.
Yeah. And I'm going to be doing a lecture at the Pacific Symposium, and I guess I'll see Rob there as well, in the end of October, called Wei Qi Gone Wild. And it's based on a lot of autoimmune conditions and people's resistance to illness. And we were just talking a little bit about how air conditioning makes people more prone to colds and so forth, and allergies, and what that has to do with environmental aspects and changes in climate, et cetera, et cetera. And I touch on these issues in the book as well. But ministerial fire, according to some schools of thought in Chinese medicine, is like really the root of the body. And so in the various schools of thought that focus on yang qi and fire, basically speaking, a dead body is cold. The first thing that happens when a person dies is they go cold. And some of the Chinese texts say that you lose qi. So actually the weight of the body goes down. But, your face and lips and everything become blue. You become ice cold. So heat is life, cold is death, from this perspective. So, and as we know, the desire to stay warm in one's body is very, very important. And I remember going places like South Florida or out here to the California desert, and you'll see old people sitting out in the sun in their lounge chair with sweaters on in 115-degree weather, here, and in 90-plus weather with humidity in Florida, because their bodies are cold, because they're losing their vital heat. We also know that in Asian cultures, and I'm sure where you are, unless they've been highly westernized, you don't see people drinking iced drinks.
No.
In fact, you see a lot more consumption of warming herbs in tropical climates. Gingers and the galangals and the cardamoms and things like that, because the digestive fire, which is an expression of ministerial fire, tends to go out.
Yes.
So when external heat creates internal cold. External cold helps nurture internal heat. So they did a study of miners in New Zealand, and they found that in the summertime, when they would go down to the mine shafts, they needed to wear sweaters because it was cold underground. But in the
Hmm.
wintertime, when they go into the same mine shafts, it was hot underground. They would just be in t-shirts working. So again, with the earth, outside when it's yin, cold, inside it's yang, warm. Outside when it's yang, warm to hot, inside the earth, it's cold. So there's also this internal external relationship with the environment where so we actually will supplement yang to some degree in the summertime, right? You have to protect
Interesting.
your yang because if you overdo the cold drinks, the ice, too much fruit, too much exposure to chill, you have to be very, very careful. There's a great physician by the name of Li Dongyuan who had the spleen stomach school, the supplement earth school. The, and he wrote a book called the Pi Wei Lun, this treatise on the
Yeah.
spleen and stomach, among several of his other books. And in this book, he warns in the summertime, do not sleep uncovered on the rooftop. Do not expose yourself to wind or moving air. So that would include, sleeping in these days by an air conditioner with the air blowing on you, or even a fan,
Yep.
because your pores are open
Hmm.
and that wind can enter the pores, and then you get what we call a summer cold, or you can get like sore
Yep.
throats and so forth. So there's
So
also
interesting.
in terms of ministerial fire, the Wei Qi, the defense Qi that covers the exterior of the body and protects you from wind, cold, damp, and also heat and dryness as exterior evils. And what makes them evils or pathogenic is when they're either in excess, like there's very strong winds, very high temperatures, very cold temperatures, extreme dryness, extreme dampness, or the body's
Hmm.
own defense chi is not strong enough to make some kind of equilibrium with even normal weather. So people who are depleted, a little puff of wind can get them sick. And I'm
Hmm.
sure you've seen people like that. They're just so susceptible to getting ill. Also, the way we design our buildings, your typical in American daycare centers and kindergartens, they don't have a good air circulation.
No.
There are buildings, there are buildings that were not designed for airflow, and therefore it makes it very easy for small children whose Wei Qi defense Qi is not fully developed to get ill. And we certainly
Yep.
found out a lot about buildings and getting sick during the COVID pandemic
Yeah.
when I would say a very high percentage of transmission occurred indoors in closed rooms and buildings. So
Yeah.
I learned
What's
about
so
that there.
interesting. Yeah. No. One of the things that you pointed out that is talking about what I see in Asia. And my own personal experience was, every time I would go to the gym to work out, and you go from a hot exterior to a freezing cold interior, and then you go inside and you start working out and sweating. And all these people at the gym were complaining because they were getting sore throats and they were getting the chills. I had one guy who was describing this feeling of, well, I feel good. I feel warm inside, but I feel like I've got this icy cold surface, like on the surface. Like I feel like I'm freezing cold.
The spaces between the flesh are called chou li in Chinese, or as Nigel Wiseman translates it, interstitious spaces. And those spaces in the flesh contain what we call the pores in modern anatomy. And sweat is an attempt by the body to reach again an environmental equilibrium between the internal environment and the external environment. So if you're sweating, if you're working out, or if you've just come from the outside in a very hot, damp environment, your pores are open and that
Yeah.
cold air, especially if it's blowing on you, literally gets stuck at the
Yep.
exterior layer of the Taiyang layer and it blocks the channel flow. And when it blocks the channel flow, it creates, it may seem contradictory, it creates heat, including sore
Hmm.
throat. But what actually is going on is that the body's vital heat, its ministerial fire, is trying to clear out wind and cold from the body. So we have this mistaken idea that any fever or inflammation is a sign of bad stuff happening to us.
Yes.
But a lot of times it is the body's response to cold being trapped in the body, in the pores, in the channels. And you have to release that cold and get the natural warmth of the body to start flowing again. And then the fever goes down, then the heat goes down, right?
I have a testimonial, excuse me, a testimonial of some sorts to that. That was a weird thing that got me interested in the subject. A couple years ago, I was living in LA when I was studying at Yosan before I took a sabbatical. And I'm happy to be back studying with Yosan remotely
Beautiful.
and finishing my studies. But one of the things that happened was when I was there, I had the doctors think it was the swine flu that came through at that time, and
It's a nasty one.
but
Yeah.
yeah, it was not fun. And what happened though is whatever it was from a Western perspective, it was a very strong cold pathogen. I remember getting sick, it attacked quickly, and then it went deep and in. I felt like there was this knot, this icy cold knot right here in my stomach. And then what happened after that is it actually went up and affected the heart. And I felt like there was this cold in my chest. And, you know, I was getting palpitations. And luckily, I was in LA and I was able to go to Yosan and get help and get treatment. But one of the things that happened is that the pathogen never was fully expressed.
Gotcha.
For whatever reason, it kind of lingered. And then years later, it kind of flared back up and I had a return of those symptoms. And one of the things that was interesting, and so when you talk about the Wei Qi gone wild,
How many years later was that?
it was at least 5 years later. And it was the
Wow.
same type of symptoms that just, and it was like, and it was interesting because
Was it the same time of year? Do you
it was
remember?
wintertime. Yeah, it was wintertime. Both times it was
Okay.
wintertime. And
Got it.
what happened that was interesting too was that it went again. It flared back into that. The lady that I was working with, and I just interviewed her, which was awesome. She was really big on the Shanghan Lun, and she's like, Sean, this sounds like, because I would describe it where I felt the pathogen was I could always feel cold in the liver, in the gallbladder and sanjiao. I could feel that cold, and she's like, "You've got this pathogen that's trapped in those layers." And she immediately she's like, "We need moxa," and she just was like using moxa in every treatment, going in, and it strengthened me to the point that I started recovering. And then finally, I was just like, "I'm having a hard time with cold weather," and I'm like, "I'm moving back to Southeast Asia." And getting into that warm heat was actually the thing that allowed me to make a recovery. Moving back to Southeast Asia was one of the best things that I ever did. Certainly, it has its own challenges, but that heat, I just would sit there in the sun and soak it in and feel this warmth. But one of the
LA wasn't
interesting
warm
things
enough
that
for you? I guess the coastal
it,
belt is not really that warm.
coast gets
Like
cold in LA. It's always in the
Marina Del
50s
Rey
and
is like
60s.
that. Let me ask you, were
No,
you ever a surfer?
I was, and surfing gave me issues.
Yeah,
Surfing gave me
surfing
issues.
can create a predisposition to this type of thing. Because think of all the cold water, even if you're wearing a
Yeah,
wetsuit, it goes in your ears, your nose, your mouth. You
yeah,
get some of that cold water inside of you. Because I'm sure lots of you've heard of surfer's ear, right? Some people even get
yeah,
damage to their ear canal, their eardrums, and so forth from it.
yeah.
So that may be one of the reasons that you've had real sensitivity to these things. So
It's and
keep
at
that in
that
mind.
time when I got sick, I was surfing more. So it's
And
really,
one other thing, you mentioned the other practitioner and that she basically picked up on this Shaoyang, the triple burner
yep,
gallbladder cold. And it was interesting. I was talking with a great teacher of Shanghai a few weeks ago. His name is Arnaud Versluis. And he was saying that he's been observing in his patients that most people's exterior defense chi, which flows in what we call the Tai Yang in Shanghanlun, that it's been compromised and that most people get Shaoyang or triple burner gallbladder issues almost immediately. And I talked with a few other of
interesting.
my colleagues, and I don't often use like what we would call pure Taiyang formulas, like Guizhi Tang, Ma Huang Tang formulas like that, which are cinnamon quick decoction, a Phaedra decoction. I more often will use a form like chai hu guizitang or cinnamon and buplurum and cinnamon decoction, which is a combination of Taiyang and Shaoyang. Because almost immediately with most people, you have to work with this because we've compromised our surface immunity so much. All right. And the Taiyang, which is the surface layer, which in channel theory is the small intestine and bladder channels, directly connects internally with what we call the Shao Yin, the kidney and the heart, which are
Yeah.
interior yin aspects. And it can affect internal organs. It's interesting you had mentioned that the pathogen went up into the chest around the heart. It
Mm-hmm.
was cold lodged around the heart, right?
Yep.
So sometimes you also have to look at the internal aspects to prevent recurrences like what you had, even though it's 5 years later. And that's one of the beautiful things in Chinese medicine. You can get an overview and see a person's health over a very long period of time rather than, oh, you have this, take this. Oh, you have that, take that. Which unfortunately, many practitioners in our field are stuck in that shrunken time space reference field rather than a
Yes.
more, can you say, quantum physics view of time along a timeline of your health and how to prevent recurrences. And that's why Chinese medicine isn't just get it while it's hot kind of thing, when
Yeah.
you're actually sick, but also build up to prevent recurrences and get that, as you pointed out, the pathogen that's still inside of your body,
Yeah.
fully handled, or build yourself up so over a gradual period of time you can eliminate it.
One of the
Right.
things that's interesting too that you tapped on there is it was this culminate this culmination of treatments and getting up. But it was interesting because when I was going through the diagnostic phase of all that, people were it was so much of this. Well, this doesn't make any sense, and I'm not hating on Western medicine, but like the patterns were not clearly put together. And they're like, well, you seem to be dealing with some type of autoimmune type thing. And it was very much like there was not clear diagnoses. And it was really hard for them. But again, from a Chinese medicine perspective, but the practitioner I worked with was like Xiaoyang right there. I can see you're describing it. The points that you're saying are sore, this feeling of coldness on this pathway. It was interesting because one of the things that happened after the condition, I developed severe food allergies. And it
Wow.
was like my body just was like, it just after that point in time, it was just like I couldn't handle all these other things. And my body only would allow me to eat, even up to this day, I eat beans, rice, and vegetables. That's it.
That's basically what we eat
And
here also in my house. And
yeah,
occasionally a piece of fish, but and a lot of fermented food, like sauerkraut
and the
and miso
same.
soup.
My body was like,
Yeah.
I allow this, the rest of this. And it was like, nope.
Yeah, milk
And
products and things. I also am very sensitive to all kinds of things.
yeah,
And that's one of the reasons I live here. And it's also one of the reasons I don't travel very much. And it's very good for my profession because, and now you're clear, if I'm sensitive, I can be sensitive to my patients. It's just like if you're an
yes,
empath, you can really feel people in terms of the Shen, the Hun Po Yi Zhi, the five minds, the five wills of Chinese medicine, and help people also emotionally. But it means you also are going to be sensitive and pick up on things. So you have to be very careful with your bandwidth, what you take in. So on the physiological level, food, on the emotional, psychological level, also food, but mental, emotional impressions coming from other people, coming from, media, especially these days and especially in these turbulent times that we're living in.
yeah.
You have to be, you have to manage that.
As a practitioner, how do you help people strengthen the Ming Men Fire for overall wellness?
Up to a point, I've studied a lot of different schools over the years in terms of herbal medicine. And I was turned on to the works of Um, a few people. There's one is Zhang Jingyue, who had the warming Yang school, supplementing Yang school, and he's put out some great books. And then there was a practitioner, Zheng Qinan, in the late 1900s, early 20th century, late 19th century, early 20th century, who had a school called the Fire Spirit School, the
Fire spirit
Woshen Pai.
school.
And he used a lot of futsa and a lot of Rogueway in his formulas. And
No.
all these types of forms are in the Shanghanlun in the yin stages, in the later yin stages. So there are
Mm.
futsa formulas in the Tai yin stage, which is basically spleen, yang vacuity. Also in the Shaoyin, where there's kidney, yang vacuity. And in the Jueyin, it also appears. It's a more complex stage of illness. That would take some more time for me to explain. But those are the main herbs. So they're very warming to the yang. And what aconite does is that it collects warmth and heat and centers it on your Ming Men between your kidneys and stores it there. The catch is you have to combine it with other medicinals to help that heat be collected and stay there. So
Mm.
famous formulas include there's one called Suni Tang, where you add
Yeah.
ginger and licorice, and those allow the yang to be contained. Or in terms of supplementing the kidneys, where you have to supplement both yin and yang, something like the Shen Qi one, the kidney qi pill, which has relatively
Yeah.
small amounts of cinnamon bark and aconite, but it without that you can't really supplement the kidneys. The other herbs supplement the jing, such as Romania, di huang, et cetera, et cetera. So
Mm.
um, there are whole schools of thought. A colleague of ours, Leslie DeVries, put out a paper. He's from Holland on the works of this one philosopher practitioner who only basically used four formulas: Shen Qi
Really?
Wan,
4 formulas.
Liu Wei Di Huang Wan, the Romania six flavor pill without the aconite and ginger. Excuse me, aconite and cinnamon. Um, Buzang Yichitang, interestingly enough, which is a Li Dong Yuan formula for supplementing the spleen and stomach,
Mm.
and Shao Chai Hutang. Those are basically the only formulas that he used.
So what was the
And
first one again?
Shen Qi Wan, the kidney chi pill,
Shenchuan.
or sometimes called
Wow.
Romania 8 flavor pill. Yeah, in modern parlance, so to speak. And he had a whole thing mapped out with former heaven, latter heaven, in terms of the relationship of the Ming Men to the original fires of heaven. I mean, just amazing stuff. His theory was quite complex, very in depth, and to him, the function of the ministerial fire was the most important aspect of human health. But interestingly enough, his therapeutics were simple, only four formulas that he used for all of his patients, which I thought was quite interesting. So
It's super interesting.
I'm just trying to remember his name. I just don't have it at the top of my tongue at the moment, or head. So,
What do you do to nourish your own Ming Men Fire?
well, I'm in, you know, in the Suwen, in the first few chapters, it says that women go through transformations in 8-year cycles.
Yeah.
Excuse me, 7-year cycles. I'm sorry, and men in 8-year cycles. So I just hit an 8-year cycle times 9, 72. And I definitely can feel different changes. And I would say that the most important thing for me at this point in my life is good sleep, deep, restful sleep. There's no doubt about it. And everything else is secondary to that.
Yeah.
So I do have a regimen. So every morning, I now start a shamatha meditation, 10 minutes, and I do my Jewish prayers that as well in terms of the spiritual aspect, and the shamatha meditation, watching the breath in terms of centering and calming my consciousness, my mind. Qigong, I've gotten much more into Qigong. I was a yogi for many years, and I still practice some yoga, but I don't do some of the more complex poses that I used to. My
Yeah.
liver blood is not as strong as it used to be, so I'm a little more stiff. So I don't do some of the poses I used to do. The difference for me between qigong and yoga is that qigong is like really flowing and moving. Like this, and that's enough to get the qi moving and flowing, and also to keep strength in the limbs and in the internal organs. So, and I also do stationary bike, and we walk. My wife and I, we walk 3 to 5 miles a day and try to find some
That's
hills. And
awesome.
San Diego is a great place to walk all year round because it never gets too hot and sweaty or too cold. So you could be outdoors all year here, which is really great. And basically the same diet that I've always had. A lot of fermented food, so I still keep that up, and grains and vegetables and mushrooms. A lot of mushrooms. I take a lot of mushroom extracts in the morning, and some of the formulas I use one formula called Dingzhi Settle the Will Pill, and there's a version of it called the Smartness Soup. So the combination of using Shi Chang Pu, which is calamus root, or a
Yeah.
chorus, and a yuan zhi. I just wrote an article on this formula, Ding Zhuan, Settle the Will, for the Journal of Chinese Medicine that's coming out in the next issue. If you remind
Awesome.
me, I can send you a copy. Glad to send you one.
Uh,
And it basically has Shi Chang Pu, Yuan Zhi, Ren Shen, and Fu Ling or Fu Shen, depending which one you want to use. And they're calming to the spirit for sure, calming to the mind. But I've been doing a lot of study in Paul Unschuld's translation of the Bunsao Gong Mu, the compiled Materia Medica classic, which was written in the 17th century by Li Shizhen. Li Shizhen, by the way, was also an expert in the Eight Extraordinary Vessels, Qi Qi Ba Mai. And he says that he was a compiler. He was, like you could say, an encyclopedist. And he compiled information on yuanzhi that basically it's an herb for the kidneys, for
Interesting.
longevity. It's not, he says it's not a heart channel herb. I mean, it's heart in the terms it enters the kidney first, then it benefits the heart. But it's
Mm.
kind of been like truncated in its descriptions in more modern texts. But he said, this is interesting. It's really strengthening to the kidneys. It has an astringent quality, it has an opening quality to it. So I've been working with that formula quite a bit for myself and some of my patients and family members as well, and getting some very good results with that because, brain is kidney. And as
Hmm.
we know, in modern culture, people are living longer in some senses, although the mortality rate is starting to go up again in America. Like the expected life expectancy is actually going down here in this country now because of the
Mm.
poor diet and the poor food, lack of exercise, high
Yeah.
stresses, et cetera, et cetera. But if you're going to be around the planet for a while and you want to keep the blood supply to your brain, if you want to keep the jing for your brain, if you want to keep functioning in that sense, also if you want to protect your heart and your kidneys, this is a great formula for that. Dingzhi Settle the Will Pill. So, and also using some of the mushrooms such as like lion's mane and reishi, lingzhi, and cordyceps, which I've been taking for many, many, many years. So all these are longevity substances and part of what Chinese medicine calls yang-sheng nourishing life practices. You know, it's
That's
not
awesome.
infallible. I mean, you get older, but there are
Yeah.
things you can do. What Chinese medicine gives, and I wish we could share with everyone out there, are the tools to maintain your own health. Many of my patients that come to see me, they tell me, "Oh, I had to see an internist, and I had to wait 6 months to see them." What are you going to do
Yeah.
between now and 6 months? And when you finally get to see them, you're a chart, and they're looking at the chart. Oh, hello, Mr. Rosenberg. Oh, so you've been experiencing this 6 months ago. So this is what I can recommend. Yeah, it's like Western medicine now is completely out of time. You can't
Yeah.
get any feedback when you need it, right?
Hmm.
For a lot of people, especially people with less money or large deductibles on their insurance,
Right.
they end up their doctor's office is the ER or emergent. What do they call it? Urgent care.
Hmm.
And that's not an acceptable state of affairs. We needed to teach people self-care first. That's what got me into macrobiotics as a teenager, which was a a doorway into Chinese medicine was it taught you this is how you sleep, this is how much exercise you need, chew your food well, don't eat more than three-fourths capacity of your stomach. All these basic teachings on how to take care of yourself. Also, kitchen medicine, things you can do for yourself, like make
Yep.
ginger tea before you go to bed, or these are very important tools, and it would eliminate, I would say, up to 80% of illness, especially acute illness, and it'll also reduce the chronic illness, all the allergies and everything that we're seeing, and
Yeah.
autoimmune aspects. And it would reduce the medical costs, which is trillions of dollars in a country like the US. I would say also 80%. And that could go into other
Hmm.
aspects of the economy, like restoring the environment, growing healthy food for people, and making it affordable for everyone. There's so many things we could be doing. So,
Yeah.
and we're not. In fact, Chinese medicine, I mean, I've talked with Rob about this. There's half as many practitioner people taking the test, the exam to become practitioners in California. And people who are acupuncturists are complaining, oh, the dry needlers are taking business. Well, they shouldn't be taking business because we don't just offer needles for pain. We offer a whole way of life to people to
Yeah.
teach and to prevent getting ill. So anyway, that's my
You,
rant on
you,
that.
I love it. I love that rant. And I think there is such a place to be an educator, and to be this educator of the people around you, because we are in a system that is very broken, and the U.S. has its issues for sure right now, especially around healthcare and wellness. There was a great photo I saw of New York City 100 years ago. And it was just all the people on the street versus New York City, the people on the street now. This was a circling on the internet the other day. And I saw this photo. And 100 years ago, everyone in New York looked like they were a fit, a gym type of a person. Everyone's,
And they show Santa Monica
not,
too. They showed Santa Monica
yeah,
Beach back in the 50s, and everybody's thin. And now
yep,
the obesity rates, even in California, which is a relatively healthier state, there's a lot of obesity and lack of health. And that's the food. It's the food, basically. And also
yep,
the sedentariness, because a lot of the physical things we used to do, like chop wood and haul water, as they say in Zen,
right?
is no longer being done. I was just in New York a month ago. And I do notice one positive change because I grew up in New York.
What is that?
So um, before, I mean, we have to. It's funny. We have to. Um, we have to. Um, sorry, I lost my train of thought because I got a ding. Um, Recognize that before Richard Nixon, of all people, there was no Environmental Protection Agency. And I grew up in a New
Yeah,
York where trucks were spewing unregulated exhaust, planes flying overhead, no regulation of noise. I lived near Kennedy Airport, which is now JFK Airport, and exposed to loud noise. I had respiratory problems growing up my entire childhood because the air was so bad. They were burning coal. My aunt, who lived in Queens, I used to go up on the roof of her apartment building. She, here, can you take this? And it was like a bag of waste, and you'd burn it. And then I remember as a little
yep,
kid looking out over the rooftops and seeing hundreds of fires coming off of rooftops. And I was going into the air, and people were breathing it back in. I dated a young woman in New York, and she had a houseboat on the Hudson River, and raw sewage was going in under the boat. You could see all the
wow.
untreated waste coming out of pipes. Now, it's been largely cleaned up, even in New York. So, in that sense, New York is a healthier environment than it was. So, I don't
Well,
get
and that's interesting.
respiratory reactions when I go back. I would drive through Pittsburgh, and immediately my lungs would get inflamed. You know,
Really.
so I caught pneumonia in New York. I said, I'll never live here again. That's when I was 28. And I was only there for like 6 months, and I got so sick. And then I got better. So I drove back to Colorado before I moved here. And I drove through Pittsburgh, stayed with a friend for the night, and immediately got inflamed again because in those days, it was like coal country, and it was
Yeah.
the air was just steel mills and all that kind of thing. So um, the environmental
It
aspects are very, very important.
we've been dealing with that here. We
Really?
have, I still see trash burned. I still see people doing that because here in Vietnam they don't have those same
Do they have
regulations
the
that are
plastic
coming up.
problem there as well?
Oh, it's awful. It's awful. There's plastic everywhere. The positive side is that
Yeah.
there is this awareness of what I'm seeing and around the world, that there is people are getting more aware about what they eat and what they put in and what they surround themselves by. And, and I think for me, it became very clear when I had a daughter because I was very aware of, like, hey, what is she taking in? And it allowed me to look a little bit more at my own space, and one of the interesting
But
things too that you pointed
sorry.
out, what was that?
No, no, you finish your sentence and I'll make a point there.
One
Go
of
ahead.
you pointed out was uh, there is so much, the wealth of information that I gained from studying Chinese medicine comes back again and again and again. And it's not always the acupuncture. It's the health information, the diet, the foods, the temperatures, those simple things about paying attention to that is such a powerful gift.
Yeah, and Asian cultures, I think, innately have that. So you're living in an Asian country there. But in the West, I sometimes I have patients or friends or family members, and they start, oh, what do you think of like what do they call that fasting thing where you do it at intervals? What's it called again? Something fasting,
In
and then
intermittent
you have
fasting.
intermittent fasting, and then you have the carnivore diet. I mean, for God's sake! And of course, keto, oh, grains, they're all bad. There's that fad. Then there was a years ago raw foods only fad, and
Yeah.
it's everything is like try this. This is going to work, and there's no
Yep.
principle behind it. So everything ends up being extreme, right? If
Mm-hmm.
you have a principle of balance of yin and yang and season and location and environment and have some connection with the soil in terms of growing food and medicines from your immediate vicinity, it's so different. It creates an intelligence that you are able
Yeah.
to, as you did, figure out what it is you need and what you don't need, what you can take and what you can't. Because the body is intelligent. Intelligence is
Yes.
not just something that's encased inside your skull and your brain. We are integrated body, mind, spirit beings. And without one or the other, you have, if you without the body, you have a ghost.
Yeah.
Without consciousness, you have a lump of meat. It's all together. It makes humanity, which, according to the Han Dynasty thinkers, is the conduit between heaven and earth. We deal with heavenly chi and earthly chi interacting. And of course, Qigong is designed to utilize that interactivity. And if we follow these principles and teachings, we'll have a healthy planet to live on, and we'll have much healthier people as well. So, um, consciousness in Chinese medicines, as we know, resides in the organs. You have the Shen of the heart, the Yi with the spleen, the Hun with the liver, the Jur with the kidney, and the Po with the lung. And I call it distributed mind, following the teachings of a Western neuroscientist by the name of Antonio Damasio. And I was turned on to his
Mm-hmm.
work by a earlier Chinese medicine practitioner named Ken Rose.
Mm-hmm.
And he wrote a book about these things. So that the whole body is conscious, and as we now know, the brain gut connection is finally being
Yeah.
discovered, and that we create essential neurotransmitters for the brain by synthesizing them in the gut, and how important the microbiomes are. We have the skin microbiome, the lung sinus microbiome, the gut microbiome, and the genitourinary microbiome. And maybe more will even be discovered after that. And keeping those regions healthy in terms of the microorganisms that grow there is so important for health and so important for consciousness.
Yes.
An unhealthy gut creates an unhealthy mind,
Hmm.
and vice versa. So, well, it's these things tied together in very clear ways. And now we're seeing that the cutting edge of biomedicine and research is also starting to pick up on that. Like the woman who was like one of the pioneers for the COVID vaccine, the mRNA vaccine, her main
Yeah.
area of research now is microbiome and looking at ways to
Really.
treat it. And there are now specialized probiotics. I think it's better in general to get from fermented foods. I think fermented foods are one of the most important keys of health, whether it's miso soup or what we discussed earlier. But they found that for autism, Parkinson's, um, multiple sclerosis, similar neurological brain related disorders, there's a researcher in Taiwan who went through 2,000 plants and he found a ferment in Taiwanese mustard greens that he
Really.
synthesized into a probiotic. And it is markedly helpful for people with gut issues, brain issues, dementia, et cetera, children with autism. And it's very helpful for a good percentage of the people, and there are FDA studies and everything on this. So,
There's a
I'm really starting to.
phenomenal Netflix documentary that I just watched for my public health class. We all had to watch a different documentary, and
Blue
I
zone?
watched this one on gut health. I can't remember the name, but I'll send it to you. I'll email it to you. It's phenomenal. And one of the things that the researchers said in the video was to be counting. And everyone's like, counting calories? No, 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 no. Counting foods. And like every week, these researchers found that the most important thing is to get the number of different vegetables into your diet. They're like, if you can get 39 different vegetables a week into your diet, that's phenomenal, because what you're doing is all of these different foods have different things that feed different microorganisms in your gut. And that this diverse array is so important. And they dive into all that you're talking about, the importance, and they talked about all of these different conditions that they've shown are linked to the microbiome. And this is stuff that Chinese medicine's been saying a long time. Eat these different foods. You got to eat from the different colors. You have to eat from different temperatures. It's there.
And it's something that continues to work. It isn't. See, there's the first differentiation diet that has to be made is between a medical diet and a maintenance diet. A maintenance diet is
Yes.
food you eat every day to maintain your health. A medical diet is where, like, for example, you could use like a raw foods diet for, say, for a cancer patient for a
Hmm.
certain limited period of time to cleanse out the system, also to help get rid of the toxicity of chemotherapy, these types of things. You can prescribe food as medicine. So that's a whole other realm, but people don't know the difference, and most practitioners are not teaching the difference. So,
Mm.
or don't know it themselves. So it leads to all kinds of problems and rebounding effects. I mean, everything rebounds when you don't have it right because the human metabolism, you can't trick it. You have to work with it. So, for example,
Yeah.
I just reading something this morning about Ozempic. Oh, Ozempic is good
Yeah.
for this and that, blah, blah. But when you stop it, almost immediately all the weight comes back. You haven't changed anything. You've only interfered with the system. And good medicine shouldn't be like that. I mean, there are some circumstances, like for example, if a person's pancreas is damaged to the point where they cannot, moderate their levels of insulin, that they may be stuck in having to take a medication to regulate their insulin levels. However, using herbal medicine, diet, exercise, so forth, you can minimize the amount of medication that they need and may be
Yeah.
able to overcome the need for it. So it's all a matter of degree. I mean, there is certainly a place for Western medications, but we want to
Yes.
avoid trying to get to the point for that. Unfortunately, there's so
Yeah.
much environmental damage that I see even healthy people getting sick just from the forever chemicals, the plastics, the microplastics, and everything, and the high stress levels that we're all dealing with living on
Right.
in this culture. So,
Well, it's
so I hope
definitely
that's not too
something.
divergent from the fire.
No. One of the things too is I think that especially now, and I've seen, I started one of the nice things about my long journey through graduate school, because I've seen a couple generations go through. I studied with Dr. Rob, and I started down in San Diego in 2006. And so I got to, see some great people down there. And then I'm seeing a new group of students come through. And one of the things that's interesting is that each of these, the generations are different. The people that come through are different. And, this new generation that's coming through has such their fingers on the pulse of media, and they have an understanding about how to spread a message, whether that be good or bad.
Yeah.
But there is this ability to say, hey, here's this information. Let's get it to people. And this podcast is an expression of that. How can we educate the people beyond just the patients in our office? How can we get this message out there? Because people want to live well. People want to feel good, and we need to tell them, well, then you need to start eating this way. You need to stop consuming so many of these types of products.
But there's also that addictive aspect as well. And basically,
Right.
addiction can be summed up very simply: a replacement therapy that you continue to need more and more of in order to get the same satisfaction.
Right.
And it's somewhat a consciousness issue. I mean, if you have a complete relationship with someone, body, mind, and spirit, sexuality becomes an integrated part of that. But if sex is your only thing, you need more and more and more and more of it. And before you know it, you start needing aids to even have a healthy sexual performance. That's usually more of a guy thing than a female thing on that level because of the nature of the difference between men and women. And it's that way also with sweets. Food can be an addiction, or certain foods can be an
Mm-hmm.
addiction. And the key to overcoming it is not trying to force oneself to stop it by getting a broader sense of awareness of what actually it is you are doing, how you are acting. Now, and the key word today is, of course, mindfulness of one's
Yeah.
own actions. Then one can, moderate it and get to a balanced place with it. So there's a lot of addictive behavior out there, and that includes the doom scrolling in the media. I've had to
Yes.
educate myself not to read the news on my iPad first thing in the morning too much, to limit it, because afterwards, like, oh my God, the world's falling apart. But when I
Mm.
look back at the last 5, 6 years, yeah, it's a very intense time to be on planet Earth. But a lot of the things, they're making up the news as you go along. I mean, I don't need to know, forgive me for even mentioning politicians, but what Trump is
No.
doing every day or what's happening to him every day. It's enough already. Or this war or that war. They're going to be going on for some time. And it probably is okay for me to just know when something really significant happens rather than people trying to predict what's going to happen next. And as we know, trying to predict the future is a fool's errand, right?
Yeah.
We just don't know what's happening next, especially now. So,
Well,
but
and
getting
it's not
back to
about
the
bringing up politics. You pointed out one thing there that I really like as a practitioner. It's not just us that's getting overwhelmed by this. We are having all of these people, everyone's coming in overwhelmed with a information overload,
are
and
you
I
practicing
think it
more?
is
Are you practicing
practice.
in Vietnam? Chinese
No,
medicine?
I'm just still learning information, and I used to do a lot of body work, but I haven't done much of anything. I practice on my family. I do moxa for my daughter, but that's about it.
But you're right about the overwhelm, and things are speeding up too much. Is like too much false young superficial, and that's one of the things I cover in this book. And I think I would definitely like to cover it before we end today. Is that the Earth also has ministerial fire,
Oh,
and
that's
that
interesting.
ministerial fire, because the inside of the Earth, the core of it is molten, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
hot. And that's why we have like things like hot springs, which are so therapeutic, is when that hot molten lava, which is caused by pressure, you know, touches a water supply, and some of those minerals go in the water, and that comes out through cracks in the earth, and then you have these great therapeutic hot springs to sit in. Which is one of my favorite pastimes is to go to hot springs. We have
Same
some
here.
nice ones here in the mountains now that reopened, and I went a couple of weeks ago. It's just fantastic. And so in Chinese medicine, a jing is yin potential qi that contains yang at its core. It's like a
Mm,
seed, has incredible potential. You add a little water to it and it sprouts, and all this life and a tree comes out of it. And out of a little seed, this can happen, right? So inside the earth, we have this incredible heat, ministerial fire stored inside of pressurized plants, animals, and minerals that are crushed over eons, long periods of time. And then they form oil, petroleum, coal tar. What we do is that's meant inside the earth. It's like a lubricant. It lubricates layers of rocks. It's part of the essence of the earth.
mm,
We take that essence, we bring it to the surface, something that's taken eons to put together, to produce, and we burn it in minutes. And
mhm,
goes into gasoline for cars, trucks, trains, planes. We most of our pharmaceuticals are made through coal tar chemistry.
mm,
Fortunately, we're starting to come off the addiction of burning coal. Plastics. Plastics are basically coal tar chemistry. They're all transformations of ministerial fire inside of Jing. And what we've done is we've either burnt them or turned them into synthetics that are not biodegradable. And that includes some of the
mhm.
medicine. When antidepressants go into the water supply, they're still there. And animals
Yeah.
consume them and hormones, and you start seeing fish with two heads or, you know, hermaphroditic lizards and things like that. And it's because we've disturbed the natural balance by working with this earthly ministerial fire. And what happens
Mm,
is that the earth becomes colder and the heavens become hotter as we burn this off. And then you get quote unquote climate change. Like this year, it's so hot in the continental US, and the hot spells are getting worse every year. And the climate is definitely changing. I don't, if people politicize it, oh, it exists, only God can do that. I mean, it's a simplistic view of God, and it's a simplistic view of science when you get political about it. But
yes.
it's a challenge that for humanity to continue, we have to do something about the plastic. I mean, I feel
Yeah.
terrible every time I get a package and there's plastic in it. Where is it going to
Yeah.
end up? It
Hmm.
doesn't, only 5% of it's being recycled. I try to keep it down. I try to be conscious, but you multiply that by 8 billion people, of which at least half of the 8 billion are using plastics on a regular basis.
Yep.
Where is it going to go? And that's a transformation of ministerial fire. So I discussed that in my book. And I got that from studying Li Shizhen's, again, the Bensao Gong Mu, where there's one volume which is waters, fires, earths, metals as medicine.
Mm,
And it goes into different types of fire. There's yin fire and yang fire. Yin fire, yang fire of heaven, yin fire, yang fire of humanity, yin fire, yang fire of earth. And each of these have medicinal qualities. And he mentions petroleum as a dark, viscous substance that bubbles up from under the earth. And he says that
mhm.
it's toxic, but it contains a lot of potential in it. It's fascinating study. And um, I'm not Einstein by any stretch of the imagination, but I will take credit for bringing this aspect of ministerial fire to public attention, even though not too many people have paid attention to it yet. But I think that's probably the most important aspect of my book, and that's why I call the subtitle of this book "Ministerial Fire in Chinese Ecological Medicine." If anyone
Interesting.
wants an argument, why should I do Chinese medicine? You know, well, we got such great Western medicine. Yeah, there's a lot of great things about modern biomedicine. But Chinese medicine is ecological medicine. It works
Mm.
with nature, with solar rhythms, with lunar cycles, with seasonal cycles, with restoring the soil's health, with restoring the earth's health, of relying less and less on plastics and so forth. It's environmental ecological medicine at its best. And that's why I think we have a very strong message for this planet in terms of helping everyone. Not just only Chinese medicine, Ayurvedic medicine, Tibetan medicine, natural medicines around the world. I There was a medical anthropologist by the name of Arthur Kleinman. He was
Hmm.
uh, Ted Kapchak knew him because I think he was also at Harvard several decades ago. And he said the only thing that's going to save Western medicine is if they rediscover their roots in Greco-Arabic medicine, with the
Hmm.
humors, using natural substances and balancing the humors, and the importance of food and lifestyle and so forth. So it's very important too because we need natural ecological medicine for the planet in order to maintain its existence in the long term. So that's a major
That's a
message of this book.
that's a mic drop moment right there. I don't think that I have any questions to ask about that, because that is literally where it's at. We have to push this message. People need to hear this, and